Good evening, good afternoon, good morning. Jan Roberts from South Africa here. And I'm continuing my series on self-care. And as I said earlier in the series, I had no idea how many subjects in self-care there are that we can talk about. And I'm only scratching the surface. But what I'm doing here is basically hopefully add value to each and every one of you so you can really get engaged in the self-care area and start to look after yourself better, because there was no time in recent history that more people are suffering from negative emotions of all a wide range of them. And also what self-care does is it builds your health, your spiritual, physical and mental health, as well as, of course, within that, your immune system. And if there is one way we can do that, is by looking after ourselves better. Now, this is number 19 already in the series, so I've talked about a variety of subjects which you can find on the Key Leadership Institute Facebook page. And today I'm going to be talking about thinking the positive way. Now, I've talked into thinking, and when I talk about coaching, I do a half-day coaching program, I talk about it as well. It's a quote by George Bernard Shaw, and it is phenomenal because George Bernard Shaw said, 2% of people think, 3% of people think they think, and 95% of people would rather die than think. Where do you belong in this? The 2, the 3, or the 95%? So when you think about that, over the many years, we have actually been programmed what to think, even when to think. That's when exams used to come up and tests. And rather than how to think or why to think. Now, this has led to a lot of discussions, miscommunications and frustrations, especially in the workplace, when leaders and managers get frustrated that their employees don't do anything unless they've been told to do so. Now, couple this with another part of programming that making mistakes is not an option, and those fears and frustrations are real, on both sides, of course. Now, many people mistake mental activity for thinking. You know some of these people, which is totally different, of course. A bit like being busy instead of being productive. How often have we been guilty of that ourselves? We are often too busy doing that we often forget being part of a human being. This talks very much into mindfulness as well, which I referred to, of course, several days ago for 2 days. I believe it was Monday or Tuesday. But there is a lot of information available about this intriguing subject of thinking as well. Even entire books have been dedicated to it, especially to positive thinking. Now, unfortunately, so many people will never pick up a book these days. Maybe some of them go on their Kindle or something, but whichever way that is. And especially one of those mumbo-jumbo books about personal development, as they've been programmed for a prolonged period of time to follow certain thoughts, ideas and processes. Now, some people snigger at others who engage in personal development and personal growth books and even ridicule them. And how do I know that? Because I was at the end of a lot of that when I decided more than 30 years ago no longer to spend money on newspapers and instead invest in my personal growth, which involved many books and CDs, even cassettes at the early stages. You ask your parents if you're too young what they were. But my colleagues, of course, they talked about those books lying on the table at their workplace in between the many tabloid newspapers, especially in my absence. And I could see that that the book had been touched, and they'd talk about it and laugh, So I know what it's like to be on the other end of it. But did I care? No, not at all. See, we are what we continually think about. And that talks very much into mind power and the power of attraction, of course. So what are you thinking about? What occupies that space in your head mostly on any given day? A quote by Benjamin Franklin. There was a lot of quotes about this thinking business, but Benjamin Franklin said, if everyone is thinking alike, then nobody's thinking. Now think about that. I hope you thought about that. But I mean, it's very intriguing that, because we're always talking about, we need to connect with like-minded and like-thinking people. it is to have kind of meaningful conversations. But sometimes there is that quote needs to be remembered. And a great example is the times we live in right now, and the divisions this causes between family members, friends and colleagues. Is this caused by our need to be right? We think we are right, or we just don't want to gather information from different sources, discuss them with respect, and then if we do not agree, which is absolutely fine of course, just leave it at that. Is that also why people start to only be part of groups that think like them? You know, it's the them and us group, and I said a long time ago, in fact I did a Facebook Live a while ago, that there is no them and us. The them and us are created by us because of whatever reasons, the need to be right, the shame of maybe being wrong, the fact that you just don't like the other person and you want to tell them something rather than understand before being understood. But there is all kinds of reasons, but we have all these factions, all these groups, and we all do our own thinking. If you're in the 2 or the 3%, and the 95% not quite sure what they do most of the time, but what would happen if we actually spend more time thinking for ourselves, I'm talking about. And when we do so before answering others in haste, sometimes with dire consequences, how much better would our relationships become? Not only with our spouse or with our children, but in our family, but in our friend circle, at work, and in the wider circles. How much would the quality of our lives increase if we not only started to think more, but also started to think more positively? Now, some of you might not believe in that so much, but there was another quote, and I'm not sure who said that, but thinking is so difficult, that's why most people judge. What do? Do you do a bit of both, or do you do mainly judging, or do you do a lot of thinking? But what happens is, and I chose positive thinking because positive thinking helps with stress management and can even improve our health. See, there is this theory you might have all heard about, as if your glass half empty or if your glass half full, and how you answer this age-old question about positive thinking may reflect your outlook on life, your attitude towards yourself, and whether you're optimistic or pessimistic. And it may even affect your health. Now, it's not a question because the glass was half empty, everybody was talking about it, in the meantime I drank the other half of the glass. No, it is a simple kind of question which people sometimes overthink. Well, there's a novelty. But we need to know this, because your health, that's why it's so important in self-care as well. If you can be more optimistic, more positive, more positive in life, it positively affects your health. And the same goes for negative, of course. And we know that already. I mean, look at it. Look at everything around us just now. How are you feeling? Every time you switch on the news, every time you listen to people who are negative. See, indeed, some studies actually show that personality traits such as optimism and pessimism can affect many areas of your life as well as well-being. The positive thinking that usually comes with optimism is a key part of effective stress management. Now, how about that? I will also do a session about stress sometime. And effective stress management is associated with many health benefits. If you tend to be pessimistic, don't despair. You can learn positive thinking skills if you choose to. And that is, the power is in your hands, in your mind actually. Will you choose to, or will you keep ridiculing all those people who think positively? Well, positive thinking doesn't mean that you keep your head in the sand and ignore life's less pleasant situations. I already said that I don't actually, I haven't invested and spend money, it's not even investment, spend money on buying newspapers for more than 30 years. That doesn't mean I don't know what's going on, but I don't need to know every single detail of every single day. I don't need to see these figures every single day because we never saw them before. They just shove them down our throat at the moment and think that we need all of that to keep us where we are. But positive thinking just means that you approach unpleasantness in a more positive and productive way. You think the best is going to happen, not the worst. I mean, if you really have a talk in the mirror today, talk to yourself, whether you do or don't. Yes, you do. No, I don't. Whether you do that or not is irrelevant. But I would really ask you, if I were you, ask yourself a question. Do you think of the worst all the time, or do you think of the best all the time, or most of the time at least? See, positive thinking often starts with self-talk. And self-talk is the endless stream of unspoken words that run through your head. These automatic thoughts can be positive or negative. Some of your self-talk comes from logic and reason. Other self-talk may arise from misconceptions that you create because of lack of information. Wow! How is that relevant to today's times? And I'm going to read that again. Other self-talk may arise from misconceptions that you create because of lack of information. And that's why information is key when you want to make an informed decision. You cannot make an informed decision if you only got one side. And the decision is not the problem. It's thinking into the information you receive, then make an informed decision. Not too difficult, but many people refrain from it. See, if the thoughts that run through your head are mostly negative, your outlook on life is mostly and more likely pessimistic. If your thoughts are mostly positive, you're like an optimist, someone who practices positive thinking. Now, there's a lot more in this as well, because it is about reacting and responding. See, if you're positive, you're much more likely to respond. If you're negative, much more likely to react. And the difference is that reacting is what happens when you let outside sources and outside environmental problems and challenges influence you. Responding is if you start thinking and then bring a response out, and give your response. It is usually much more effective, much more positive, and much less violent or much less agonistic. I hope that makes sense. But there is health benefits of positive thinking. See, researchers continue to explore the effects of positive thinking and optimism on health. And in certain hospitals, by the way, entire wards are dedicated to positivity and optimism. They show comedies on TVs. They have upbeat colors on the walls, positive reading material, and cheery staff. And the thing is, and you can look this up, this has shown to help the healing process of patients tremendously. There are also recommendations that if you have to go into a serious operation, you only do so when you have a more positive state of mind. So it helps the healing process even before it begins. Mumbo jumbo? If you're not sure, why don't you just try it? It's worth it. Health benefits that positive thinking may include are the following: increased lifespan, lower rates of depression, lower levels of distress, great resistance to the common cold and any other coronaviruses you can think of. That's all I'm saying. Better psychological and physical well-being. How much can we do with that? Better cardiovascular health and reduced risk of death from cardiovascular diseases. Do you actually realize that the human species is the only species on the world that has a specific disease in a specific time of the week? Between 8 and 9 o'clock on a Monday morning, there's a 38% higher increase of heart attack, strokes and other causes of death than at any other time of the week. Ask yourself why that is. Because people think negatively about work, people think negatively the day before, and the stress and everything that's happening at work because of all this negative emotions and everything that happens. I even talk about me time and all the other kind of stuff that we need to do about our self-care is missing. Is it not time we started to look after ourselves better? And there's another one: better coping skills during hardship and times of stress. Oh, I cannot say I just told you so, but I did just tell you so. So it's unclear why people who engage in positive thinking experience these health benefits. For some, because I say doctors and people have studied this in great length, and to them it is very clear, but to the majority of people it isn't. One theory is that having a positive outlook enables you to cope better with stressful situations, as I just said, which reduces the harmful side effects and health effects of stress on your body. And the same happens with negative emotions, the stresses that causes on your mind and body. So it's also thought that positive and optimistic people tend to live healthier lifestyles. They get more physical activity, follow a healthier diet, and don't smoke or drink alcohol in excess. How is that then? So I just want to finish with this. Don't just start to think, but also start to think more positively, as I hope you have now seen how it can impact your health in an amazing way. Become part of that 2%. Become part of the 3%. But get away from the 95% and don't just believe that mental activity is actually thinking. Start to think into, become more creative. Start to think into your whys. Ask more questions, because that covers the creative process, and also, get really engaged. But, I would say do your homework, start thinking, start having thoughtful conversations, first of all, with yourself, because the first person you should maybe ask better questions is the person looking in the mirror every day. But start thinking, and I would say afterwards, start thinking more positively. It works, but you all have to try to find out for yourself. We will see you tomorrow. Have a great evening or a great rest of your day. Take care.